One interesting thing I kind of wanted to throw out there today for you to ponder about. I had a great discussion yesterday with my son Thomas for about 3 hours about this, and it was something that's called the experience machine. Have you ever heard of that before? It's there's a good site on it online if you're curious, but it's basically the idea is if you were given, say, a holodeck and the fountain of youth, for example, you could have as much time as you wanted, hundreds or thousands or millions of years in your own personal holodeck, which you could do whatever you want with. You can interact with other holodecks. You can interact with real people from other holodecks if you want to make it interesting. There's lots of entertaining AI that can keep you guessing and keep you surprised, right? So just anything you can imagine about the real world on your perfect world. You're essentially a god of your own holodeck, and you can do whatever you want. So it just got me thinking in so many different angles on how this could work and how this could be perhaps a great goal for society to work towards, is giving everyone their own personal holodeck and fountain of youth and doctors to take care of them and just enjoy. Would that be heaven? Is that our
That
version of heaven we could theoretically create someday?
that's also double-edged a little bit because there's it has been discussed in science fiction a lot as an actually opposite to exploring the space and time continuum as the future for humanity because you don't have to go anywhere where you have this kind of holodeck thing. And the sort of ultimate expression of that within our known laws of physics would be Matryoshka brain, which is essentially a Dyson swarm built around a star, which uses all of that power to essentially you've converted the people to some sort of digital existence at that point to
Right.
to conserve energy, and they are in simulations of like whatever they want. So they kind of like immense number of people in the structure like that being in there like simulations of whatever they want. The
Yeah.
thing is that it could be like at odds because it's sort of like a detaches people from reality, and if you then in reality need to there's like still problems to solve or like actual things to discover, it sort of could be actually a kind of an endpoint of a civilization, not necessarily in the positive sense. It would just be a kind of a end to civilization.
Yeah. So, well, that's a great point. So, for example, say it never really ended. You could still react with let's just call it the real world. Um, so say maybe everyone spent 10 or 50% of their time in the real world, and then, at night or whenever they're bored, they could go into their holodeck to enjoy whatever happy fantasies or happy challenges they might want to enjoy in their off time. Um, but I think you're kind of right that over hundreds or thousands or millions of years, people would want to spend less and less time in the real world and be happy with their fantasy godlike created worlds. So it's a good question. Is that good or bad for society? Is that a good or bad goal for society to work towards? I think it's a very interesting question, but many people don't have the capacity to even imagine what it might be like. So it's just scary to them, and it's so unknown that anything scary and unknown is definitely bad, right? And so they'll definitely fight against it using whatever debate or logic they can come up with because they just don't understand it, or they don't have a concept of why it could be a good endpoint for society. And it doesn't have to be an endpoint. Like theoretically, the heat death of the universe will come 10 to the 100 years from now, and that's kind of our endpoint, if you want to call it that. But at that point, who knows? Maybe we can find a way to recreate a universe, or travel to another parallel universe that's not going to experience a heat death for another 10 to 100 years.
Yeah, well,
Um,
it's an interesting topic because again it's very complex if you try to think about it, how what it would entail in reality. There's also potentially many dangers because like with everything else, it's about implementation. It could very easily also become a kind of hell depending on who's controlling the virtual environments, and
right.
you could like essentially entrap people in a world of somebody's design
Yes.
to make them not have a great time for eternity until like the universe ends. Also,
Absolutely.
there's a whole argument that if you think about it, that could be exactly what this is.
It
That
could be. We could.
that
It could
like
be.
already like heaven is essentially just the real reality from which these lives that people like go through are the simulations that is just kinds of new experiences that they want to experience because they essentially can create in their virtual environment a universe in which they can really exists, so it sort of blurs the distinction. If it's good enough technologically, it completely blurs the distinction between reality and simulation, in that maybe reality deep down actually already is a simulation. It's just like a matryoshka doll of like a nested like worlds within worlds within worlds within worlds already, because that's statistically even quite likely based on thinkers like Bostrom, Nick Bostrom, who came up with the whole serious simulation theory hypothesis. So essentially, his theory is it's more statistically probable that we are living in a simulation, because like of all the realities, quote unquote, it's statistically probable that most of them will be simulated. If simulation is a thing that exists and a reality can be sufficiently well simulated, then you can essentially have to conclude that it's just a minority of realities that are really real, and even those
Right.
could be nested. So it's like one of the, like, you can ponder it endlessly. It's like interesting at, like, we can have it as a direction, I think, to like for development, because I don't think you will quite get there. I know like there are many techno optimists who think that we're almost there already. Just look at like how the graphics are great, but I have like a whole the science that I sort of developed for myself that I call chironics, about the structure of the simulation in terms of its meaning. Is that like our simulations, in the sense of like giving meaning to people in them, are very crude, and
Hmm.
there would have to be like a whole new science that would take a long time to develop to make a spontaneously like situation, like a simulation that could emergently spontaneously simulate actually meaningful experiences for people. That's like a whole level of technology that we don't have, like however good the graphics are. Not to mention like all the other senses and whatnot. So I think it could take quite a while, and it's definitely, it can go much further than it is now and still be great. Because I actually, just yesterday, I've watched randomly a video from one of the AI experts who sort of coincidentally shares a lot of perspectives with me that I just didn't know about him, that he exists. It just he arrived independently to some of the same conclusions. Like in his view, what's good about simulate the virtual reality, especially, is that how it makes you appreciate reality. In that suddenly, even the most basic things, like just like kinetic movement in an environment, suddenly become new again, like as if you
Yeah.
were like a child. So in his view, it's like it's supposed to serve the function of enhancing reality, more so than to be an escape from reality. But that's how it's in how it's implemented. Like a civilization can decide to use it in many different ways.
Yeah, I like it. It's I just think this it's a great thought experiment to say if we even can begin to prove that it's feasible and that it's possible. I think there's pretty much it's almost a bulletproof argument where you if you were if, as long as people were free, let's just say, as long as they're not entrapped in these terror realities, and as long as they have the option, say they want to experience an hour of terror in a haunted house and they want to block their memories or something so they can only remember that particular life or whatever, and they choose to experience an hour of horror or because it's fun. As long as they have the choice and they can set a time on that maybe, and then after an hour they get all their memories back and they get all their experiences back and they say, oh, that was fun, I'm glad I was able to do that. I think that's definitely a key important thing, is that every single intelligence that's in this machine or is able to have a holodeck has the freedom to choose whether or not their personal holodeck is a part of the whole or is influenced by the whole. And as long as they hold on to that freedom at all times, that should be kind of the prime directive, I guess, is that everybody's individual freedom is maximized without infringing on the freedom of anyone else. And I think that should be probably one of our main rules for sentience or for intelligent intelligence, is that it's able and free, has agency to choose how to live its life.
Yeah, that's
Um,
very interesting, because that's in some way like the critics of people who believe in artificial intelligence becoming a big part of the future of the human future, and actually being able eventually to become a true general intelligence. What they say against it is that essentially it's kind of religion. It's just like a
it
new
is.
kind of religious belief that's very analogous to the old kinds of religious beliefs. Like, for instance, if you believe this world is simulated, then it's like literally that you believe that there's a creator, who like you should try to stay in the creator's good graces so that the creator rewards you or something. And so it's
Yes.
like almost exactly the same. But this could be a. It's also interesting how, but this new metaphor of simulation can give you a way to answer some of the like metaphysical questions almost completely objectively, and like that it would just make sense technologically that it would be done that way. And one of those is, for instance, the question of like, why do bad things happen to good people? If this was a simulation where you just like wiped your memory so that you can live the experience, but before you chose everything that's going to happen to you within the life, or like within the at least the general parameters of it, and we were like consented with all of the like suffering and dangers and stuff,
Yeah.
then there is no problem.
Yeah. Exactly. I I think it's a great, at the very least, I think it's a good motivator to think that if we could create our own heaven, and if we could create our own fountain of youth and holodeck, then it in really many ways supersedes religion. It's like whatever your version of heaven is that you're aiming for, we could possibly do it on Earth. We could possibly create heaven on Earth if we can. First of all, you got to get climate change and the world politics and all these other things under control. Solve these 17 world problems, and then you can focus on eternal life, and then you can focus on eternal heaven, whatever your version of heaven is, right? And those two goals could theoretically very, very well, in a very great way, unite all of us saying, yes, those are great goals to at least aim for. I want to be a god. I want to be free to choose my own reality as much as possible. And I'd love to interact with other people's realities. I'm very curious as to what other worlds other people will build in their realities. I'd love to visit a million different worlds. It's just the possibilities are so endless that I can't imagine ever getting bored. I can't imagine ever wanting to turn myself off when I've got a million or trillion or 10 to the 100 different possible worlds to explore and
And
lives to live.
especially if you could do, because again that would explain like if this is what life is part of like many lives in some sort of higher construct of
Yeah,
existence, then again if you just get bored with something you can always wipe your memory and
exactly.
start fresh again. So it's really just about the ultimate technological capability of it, and on some level you just start like essentially metaphysics become physics,
Yeah,
but then you let yourself forget all the rules that you figured out and set in place so you can figure them out again. And that really can go on forever, which is why it's probably a good model. It's like for the like the baseline reality of reality, if consciousness is a thing that exists naturally in that reality, is that this all that you essentially trying to accomplish could have already been accomplished uncountable eons before, but then it's like the fun is in accomplishing it. So it would just be
yeah,
like try to accomplish it again. And on some level, it's just the baseline reality could have even different physics than any particular universe that you live in any particular incarnation. So who's to say like what the exact solution was? In like maybe the fun is in trying to figure it out in a different universe with different laws and problems and limitations. So yeah, all of those have mathematically infinite variations. So
yeah.
sure.